The Seven Islands property is located just west of Old Burnstow Road, adjacent to the North Spreader Waterway, just south of Tropicana Parkway. So if you could sort of picture that, you know, Tropicana Parkway kind of runs into the North Spreader Canal if you go too far west. Well, if you were going too far west and you looked to the south or to your left, that's the Seven Islands property. And it is part of a very large parcel of property that the city of Cape Coral purchased several years ago. It's the jewel of that group of property that was purchased. And in that purchase, there were 491 parcels or lots. Some of them were not the same as a city-sized lot, but it was called the 491 purchase. And the city of Cape Coral, in my opinion, did a really good thing in acquiring that property, because a city needs property to do things, to build city buildings, to put up storage facilities for city equipment, to put up infrastructure, to put in lift stations for city water and sewer. So it was a smart purchase. And the Seven Islands component of that purchase, the jewel, is about 60 acres. And it's really not, they're really not islands. They're actually little peninsulas that shoot out into the North Spreader Canal. And they're connected, those peninsulas are connected to Old Burnstow Road by a strip of property. So that parcel, actually, the Seven Islands, is really the last waterfront, call it development, that'll happen in Cape Coral. There just aren't any large parcels of property on water that can be developed. And certainly in order to do a development, a mixed use type development, which is what that would be, you need enough property to put restaurants, shops, condominiums, those sorts of facilities, maybe a marina. And several years ago, the city actually engaged all the local residents in what was called a charrettes process. And they asked the residents what was important to them. And they received a lot of feedback, and they incorporated that feedback into the design plans that were done for the development. And those design plans were shopped around internationally and domestically to look for a developer that was willing to work with the city to develop that phenomenal piece of property. And, you know, my editorial is, if you haven't set foot on the Seven Islands property, you should take an opportunity to do that. It is like nothing else in Cape Coral. It's amazing, both from a closeness to the estuary standpoint, also from the wildlife that's there. There's an eagle on the property. You'll see manatees, dolphins. It's a phenomenal piece of property. The design plans that were developed through the charrettes process were shopped around. And there was one developer that came back and said, yeah, I think I can do this. I think I can put together a proposal and move it forward that will make sense for the city and for the developer's business. Unfortunately, with the economy the way it is, and with some of the requirements that were in that design, that did not work out. So that developer was not chosen. And where the property sits right now is, or the development, I should say, sits right now is, it's being shopped around again. And perhaps when, you know, we're past this COVID thing and the economy turns around a little better, maybe some more developers will show some interest. These are really tough times to be doing a large mixed-use development, just because, you know, developers don't want to speculate in these kind of economic times. But, you know, perhaps in a couple of years, something will take shape. Until that happens, though, the Northwest Cape Coral Neighborhood Association is taking ownership of that property. What we want to do is make sure that it stays in really good shape, that there is no litter on it, that it doesn't fall in disarray. So on Saturday, February 6th, we're actually holding a neighborhood cleanup day where the 7 Islands is the property that we're going to clean up. We'll have a large group of members who've already committed. They're going to show up at 9 o'clock on February 6th, and we're going to walk the islands, pick up all the trash that's there, pick up all the old fishing line and hooks and lures that might be laying around and all the other stuff, and get that property back to looking like it should look. And we're also going to keep an eye on it.
Fantastic. Thank you, John, for that overview and in-depth kind of history of what's going to happen with that development. I'm curious, what sort of concerns have the residents expressed in regard to how that property is developed, and what is the association doing to address those concerns? Before I let you answer, though, I do want people to know that if they want to become a member, they just have to visit nwcape.com, click on join or donate. You can become a lifetime member for $15, and we would certainly appreciate any additional funds. So, John, please go ahead and answer that question.
Thank you. Well, I think it's fair to say that anytime there's large-scale development in a residential neighborhood, there are concerns. There are concerns of traffic. There are concerns about what will happen to the estuary. This is a really special piece of property. It is right on the Charlotte, I think it's the Charlotte Preserve Estuary, but I may not have that name right, but the bottom line is that the property that is to the west of it does in fact border Malachet Pass and Pine Island Sound, and it's pretty special property. So there have been some concerns raised by local residents that we want to make sure that any development that is done, there's no harm that's done to the environment and to the estuary and to the wildlife that's there. Another concern that was raised, and I think it's legit also, is the height of the buildings. That piece of property is much narrower than, let's say, Tarpon Point or Cape Harbor. And as such, I personally don't think 25-story skyscrapers belong on there. Not that 25 stories is a skyscraper, but in that particular piece of property, it would appear as such. And also, just the proximity of the large buildings to the residences. If you look at the 7 Islands property, there is a right-of-way or an easement to Old Burnstow Road. Then there is Burnstow Road, and then there are the homes. So the homes are literally right across the street in very close proximity to whatever development is going to happen there. So, those are some of the concerns that have been raised, but, I think that's a good thing, in that the fact that concerns have been raised is an indication that people feel comfortable voicing their opinions. And I think they also feel fairly comfortable that their concerns are going to be addressed. Maybe not 100% the way that they would like them to be addressed, but some movement will happen in that development. I truly believe this, as a result of the feedback that the city of Cape Coral gets from the residents. And, that was demonstrated in the charrettes process. And then there have been a lot of conversations about just what is going to happen with that development. And I've been a part of some of those conversations. One option that has been put on the table, which I think is kind of an interesting option, is maybe we don't develop all 7 islands right away. Maybe the way to start is with a couple of islands to do some commercial development, or maybe even some mixed use development, but not start all at once. And I think, there may be developers that are more receptive to a smaller project than taking on all 60 acres at the same time. Those islands or peninsulas are about 5 acres apiece, somewhere in that area. So, if we were to take on, let's say, 2 islands and develop it, that would be about 10 acres of development, shops, restaurants. And I think, the residents would then also have an opportunity to acclimate to it, to become comfortable with that piece of property being developed, and they may be more receptive to future design considerations over time.